his early days. Okay, Grandpa. Tell us about the Kimmer.
Kimmer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We moved to Kimmer on the 21st of September. On the 21st, the 3rd of September, on my birthday. We left Randolph.
How old were you?
I was 10 years old, and Grandpa gave us each 10 pennies. And he said, when you get up to Sage, you can buy you something with them.
Gave who 10 pennies?
Dale and I, my twin brother.
Okay.
They let them go alone, just those two
So
little.
we saddled our horses, and they tied a blanket on the back of each one. So when we got there, we was going to sleep up in the hay in the corral, so the cows wouldn't get away at night. We put them in a corral up there that belonged to the railroad, where they used to ship sheep and that to hold them until the train got there.
So you and your twin brother left on your 10th birthday, and you only had 10 pennies each with you. And you were going to take all the cows?
Yes,
How many?
35 cows.
And how far were you taking them?
18 miles to Sage. That was the first day we could go. That was the first place we could get to.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to let them graze all the way along because they're all milk cows. We had to feed as they go, or they wouldn't give any milk.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just let them graze, and it took a long time. And so we'd just ride our horses and set side saddle and everything else to kill time, you know. They said, whatever you do, don't crowd them. So we thought, boy, we'll never get there. But anyway,
Where did you eat?
we took lunch with us.
Hmm.
And we each had a lunch that we took with us. And so we just drove along, let the cows, there was no road as we just cut through the sagebrush where there's more feed for the cattle.
Mm-hmm.
But we knew that we were waiting to go. And so as we traveled, we just kept stopping and letting the cows eat.
And it just took you one day to get there?
Mm-hmm.
And
That
then,
was just a third of our trip.
and then where'd you go?
So we got to Sage that night and put the cows in the corral so they wouldn't go back home at night, because the cows would try to go back to its home.
Mm.
So we put them in this corral and closed the gate. And so we put our horses in there too. And so we were gonna sleep on a haystack. And so Pates lived over there just a little ways from where we were in Sage. And they were real poor people. This Ora Pate wrote a lot of church books. She was extra smart. And she wrote a lot of church books, and so they said, come over and stay with us tonight. And so we had to crawl up in the attic up a ladder to get up where we slept. And so we took our blanket up with us to wrap up. And they said, do you need any more quilts? And we said, we don't know how cold it get here. He said, well, up there it stays quite warm, because we keep the stove going downstairs all night. It was just a kitchen stove. And so we went up to bed, and next morning they called us. We told them we wanted to get up early so we get started with the cows. And so that night the cows all had to be milked, every one of them.
Mm.
They were all milk cows. Had their calves and needed to be milked. So we went around it's railroad workmen. They work on the railroad there. Mexicans, most of them. And they come down, how much milk will you have? Was all you want.
Mm.
They'd bring buckets and just anything they could pour the milk out. And they didn't have to strip them. That's the last part. You strip the cow once you're through with the heavy milk, and then you go over and just strip the milk out, what little's left. But you don't need to strip them, you know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
So they just milked them and hurried home, get some more cans. And so we did all 35 of them.
Oh.
And so we left and went over to Pate's that night, and we went upstairs. They asked us if we'd had lunch, had something to eat, and they said yes. We had just had something to eat before we come over. We finished our lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next day, there's a little grocery store there who was going to buy what we needed. But see, we'd give them milk in the store for whatever we needed.
Oh.
He'd sell the milk, saying,
Oh.
tickled him pink to get some free milk. And we said, we might need a few groceries because we don't have any money.
This is
And he says, come in.
10-year-olds.
And so we went in and picked out what we wanted. We got a lot of these fig Newtons, they call them. They were a little long cookie with a jelly inside, kind of. And we figured they'd be good, and we got just what looked good, and a lot of jawbreakers. Jawbreakers are right round and black and some red.
No good vegetables or anything.
Well, no.
You're only 10 years old.
And so, anyway, the next morning, when we went down, crawled down this ladder, and they said, well, now have breakfast with us, so you won't have to leave hungry. And so we were starting to eat, and Dale said, hey, these eggs are sure dark looking. And he says, well, you think so? And he said, yeah. And he had eaten a couple of them. And he says, well, they're duck eggs. And he made it to the door before he vomited. He made it just to the door, not on the steps. And he had wooden floors in there, you know, he could vomit anywhere, and it would run down between the boards. But he made it outside. And I didn't let it bother me that much. And so, boy, I couldn't keep him down. I couldn't keep him down. so they have their own bacon net, you know, they cut off what they call side pork.
Mm-hmm.
And they just go out there and strip off pieces and then bring it in and slice it. And it's actually better than bacon.
Very nice. Now, do you want to turn
And
it
so-
on? I'll give you the baby.
Okay. Okay, hang on one second.
Aren't I holding? Oh,
Then we had to go the next day. We had trails up there to put
do
the
you wanna
cows
see
in at night so they
Grandpa?
wouldn't leave.
You like his
And there's
voice.
fossil up there in the mountains. And the tourists heard about it and they come down there and just gather it up. They'd take the tire irons and screwdrivers and pry them loose and get pieces 8 and 10 inches square of a fish right in the fossil, in the rock.
Hmm.
And so Kimmer said, hey, why don't we put a sign there, no trespassing, and then charge them to come in? And man, they just made money right and left. They'd tell them right where to go to get the fossil.
Huh.
And so they'd come up there and wait in line to go up this little narrow road to get them, dig up the fossil and come out.
Huh.
And so Spud and I thought we'd go down there someday and bring a bunch of it home, take it back to Kimmer. And so we went down there and took regular tools we needed to raise them up in bigger, larger pieces. And took it up there and they'd say, hey, where can we get some of this? They wanted more than what we had. Where can we get some of this? And we said, it's down the road about 15 to 16 miles.
Mm-hmm.
But next time you come through, we'll have some more for you. So we didn't tell them right where to go. But they finally got smart and shut it off only to pay to go in
Oh.
and made a regular business out of it.
Uh-huh. So tell us about you and Spud on that. You were going on your second day and you got, how did the second day go?
We started out that morning, we had everybody come and milk, could help us milk the cows.
Yeah.
Just coming daylight, just so we'd get started early.
Mm-hmm.
And we had them stand under their buckets and, will there be enough for me? The ladies would say, oh, we get a lot of it. These over here have never been milked yet. So we had 35 and that's a lot of cows.
Yeah.
To milk by hand. And so there's just plenty to go around. And she was really excited about getting her share. And they were mostly Mexican people that worked on the section gangs, their husbands did.
Hmm.
Took care of the railroad from Cameron down into Montpelier, Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got plenty of milk. And if we want to, we can strip the cows. After they're all milked, then you can go back and strip them. Very fine milking, just you get what's left.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't milk hard, then you just go easy
Mm-hmm.
and they call that stripping the cow.
Hmm.
Well, when they're milked regularly, they should be stripped after they're milked. Then each one of them goes around and strips every so many cows,
Mm-hmm.
so that all of them get taken care of. Because if they leave any milk in there, it has a chance to clabber,
Oh.
and then it's hard for them to get going again.
Mm-hmm.
And so they always strip them after they're through.
So after everybody milked all those cows, then you guys went on your way?
Yes,
Where did you stay that night?
we're up to Fossil. There's just about 16, 17 miles.
In that you stayed with the family?
Oh,
No, right straight up the road.
What did
But
that do?
we'd graze the cows off the road where they could feed as they go.
Uh-huh.
Because the only way they can give milk the next day is to have food to
Yeah.
produce milk.
Yeah.
And so we'd kind of stay off the side of the road maybe 100 yards.
Uh-huh.
And we'd just go through the sagebrush and let them browse and eat as they go along.
And then did you just sleep outside that night?
When we get up there that night, we got a hold of this fellow, we had his name, that's head of the corrals up there. And we was wearing under Gray's boys, and he said that he called you and we contacted you, we could put the cows in the corral so we wouldn't leave at night. Because cows like to go home.
Mm-hmm.
If you leave them go, they just go right back home.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, oh yes, put them in there. And the horses too, he said. And so then he said, have you got any quilts or anything? We said, well, we got a couple. And he said, well, if the wind blows here tonight, it can still get cold, even though it's just the 1st of September. We got them the 3rd, so
Mm-hmm.
it can get cold, so he said, let me bring you a couple of quilts down. And so he brought us some down that just, well, they hadn't been able to use anything but just camping. You'd almost be afraid to get them, they were so dirty. But he was sure nice. And so he said, you think that'll keep you warm? He said, if it's okay, we're gonna dig down the haystack a little bit, so we're kind of covered from the wind. And so we slept pretty good. Next morning we wasn't, you know what I mean? Nobody had to wake us up.
Mm-hmm.
The first time we heard a coyote, we was wide awake.
Uh-huh.
And coyotes in those days would come around all the time. They just
She
nothing at all.
doesn't want to hear you.
And so, home up there, and anything from a brassiere to a horse collar for pulling a horse, using a horse. If they says, we've got it if we can find it. And just one of those stores, country store, you know, everything you could think of.
Uh-huh.
And so they says, have you boys got plenty of lunch? We said, well, right now we haven't. And they said, well, come on up and let's see what we can find for you.
Huh.
And so we'd give them so much milk that they felt they owed us, I guess.
Oh.
And they said, oh, take more than that. And we took, those Babe Ruth bars.
Uh-huh.
We both like Babe Ruth bars. And we liked those Hershey's that you could break in little squares.
Uh-huh.
And so they had a lot of those, and so we just took 2 or 3 of those and some Hershey bars. And then we said, have you got any licorice? Licorice lasts longer than candy. So, because traveling that far is a long ways.
Uh.
And so she said, well, there with that. And she found some licorice and put it in a sack for us, and we took off. And she said, where are you going today? And we said, we're going to try to make it to Kimmer, up to P.J. Quayle Ranch. I said, my folks have leased Quayle Ranch. He owned all those mines up there.
Mm.
He had a lot of money. And so we're going to try to make it. And she said, well, what you can do, when you get up here on the top of the hill, it's about 6 miles from here, you can turn off to the left, and he said, and go right down into to the Hemsworth River. Then your ranch is just, when you get on the river, follow the water right into your ranch. It goes right through your ranch, within about a block of the house. And so the cattle, it was good for the cattle, so you let them graze as they go. Because they got to eat every day if they're going to produce milk. And so when she said to turn off there, and I said, we're not too far up. And she said, well, no, you'll hit the river. But she says, then follow down up the river, 'cause it's coming this way. And see, so when we hit the river, it felt pretty good. And then the cows wanted to get a drink too. And if you're careful, you can let the cows drink in places where the bank isn't high. They can go right and walk into the water. And they like to walk out to where it's about up to their knees, where they don't have to stretch their neck to drink. And I think it's easier for them to drink if they don't reach so far. Now, a horse will actually get down his knees if he's got to reach.
Yeah.
Lean on his front knees. He's a little bit smarter than the cows, I guess.
So were you and Spud on horses?
Oh, yes.
Huh.
We each had a saddle horse with a blanket tied on the back.
Huh.
And so we both had nice horses. They were trained, and you could lay your reins on the ground. And as long as they was touching the ground, the horses wouldn't move.
So when you got to your ranch, then what'd you do?
Well, when we hit the Hemsworth River, then we followed up the river, and she told us how far, much farther it would be. This was Peter Nell. The guy was Peter O'Neill was his name. And he was one of those wops that made moonshine. And people would just drink that stuff. Well, it was great. They loved it because it was cheap, you know. And so the first year was there in September. See, we left. The crops were all gathered.
Yeah.
So our ranch wasn't leased at that time. And so the crops were in very bad shape. And so we thought, well, what are we going to do? And so Peter Buzzanella, that had his ranch right there, he said, if you want, I'll bring you a load of, they called it, it was anyways for when you're making wine. It's the stuff that's in mash.
Oh.
And so we'd appreciate it, I know. And so anyway, he brought us a load of that down. He had about, it took him pretty near an hour to drive down with it.
Oh.
And the folks wanted to pay him, and they said, no, just let me load up a little bit with milk, and I'll be more than happy.
So when you got there, Grandpa, was anybody else at the ranch already? Or were just you and Spud were the only ones there when you got there?
They beat us up there quite a bit.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, in D.C., my older brother, 5 years older, he took off for some horses, and we never saw him again.
Oh.
He was anxious to get up there.
Oh.
Wasn't he supposed to stay with you?
Oh, no. He wanted us to stay with the cows.
I would have.
That's all he could think of was getting up there.
And so your mom and dad were already up there by the
Yes.
time you got up there. So
Oh,
you
yes.
guys were just going slow with the calves.
And we couldn't stay around the road. We had to stay out where there's feed.
I see.
And we'd find places away from the road where the sheep hadn't grazed, and there's lots of good
Yeah.
feed. And so a lot of times we wouldn't see the road for a long ways.
Wow.
Or we'd see a car once in a while. There wasn't many cars like today. You just see
Yeah.
a car once in a while. And it was an old car like a Model T Ford and stuff like that,
Uh-huh.
or a truck.
So Grandpa, you were 10 years old. What year would that have been?
September the 3rd, 1911.
1911 is when you were born. What year were you born?
1911.
And so on your
September the 3rd.
and so on your 10th birthday, that would have been 1921.
Yes.
That all of this happened.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to turn this off just a minute.
We were just building a house for us to live in. And so
This is in Kimmer, or
In
where?
Randolph.
In Randolph.
we'd never been in a house with a toilet before.
Oh.
It was going to have one inside. We just couldn't believe it.
Oh.
But it didn't flush or anything. You had to push
Uh-huh.
the bucket and flush it out. Because we used to say to Mother afterwards, remember when we had the pot on the head, we really missed that. And she says, you kids missed it a lot of times. It was at night with no lights, you know. You tried to kneel in front of that pot.
They didn't have electric light.
Oh, man, no. You had a lantern if you wanted to light it. And they
You
carried
kids
one
missed it a
around
lot,
the
huh?
She says, you kids missed that a lot. She says. And then when it was cold weather, they wanted us to go outside. They wanted to go outside anytime. But even when it got cold, they wanted us to go
Yeah.
outside. And we used to stand on the porch and try to make circles in the snow. The snow up there when Randolph was cold too, a lot.
Yeah.
But up around Kimmer in those valleys, there'd be no snow drift in there.
Okay, Grandpa, tell us about when J.C. Penney opened his first store and asked you to pass out his little flyers.
So
And-
we rented this ranch from P.J. Quady.
Okay, yeah.
And so when he came out and said everything's gonna be okay, and we said, my Uncle Nor and my dad's born in 1883, he was born in 1896. Is there a chance we can move one of those houses from one of your mines that's closed up over to here? And he says, how in the Lord did you move that with the equipment you got today? And my dad's gonna saw it right in 4 pieces, right through the middle, go up the side, across the top, down there, then over the top and down the other side. It'll be 3/4. Just a small house, you know. And we're gonna drag one over at a time on poles that just pull like skis. With the front kind of shapered up so we can catch. And we pulled 1/4 of that house over to where we wanted it. I got some pictures of it in here. Could you take them with that?
Yeah, we probably could. I'll get them in just a minute.
Well, I'll get them out.
Okay, okay.
Don't bother now.
No. But anyway, we pulled those to take 1/4 at a time.
I'm doing good
And we'd
here.
put 4 horses on so it drag each year.
Can you-
And then we slid them together like they should be. And Dad was a good carpenter, and he'd get up and shingle over those places. First he nailed them good, then he shingled over those places that were so they wouldn't leak. And so Aunt Lot and Uncle Nor moved into there. They didn't have any children then.
This is your dad's brother?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
he was
Younger one.
about 12 years younger than Dad.
Huh.
He was born in 96 and Dad 84. So
Oh.
it was 12 years.
Okay.
Is that something in our house?
No.
We got the house all nailed together and we got in a little stove and put in there. The way you heated it was with a kitchen range, you know.
Look how tired he
And
is.
so they went to town and picked up a Monarch range, an old one. And the fellow that sold it to him sold it cheap, and he says, we know it works because we used it right until my wife just wanted a better stove. So we put that little stove in,
I think you're good.
and Aunt Lot and Uncle Nor moved in there.
And there was already a house on there for you guys?
Yes, there was a house there.
Huh.
I got pictures of it here.
Okay.
And anyway, Aunt Lot and my mother couldn't get along.
Oh.
It was just sad. At one time, shouldn't mention this, but she accused Homer of not being her baby. Oh, Mother just cried, couldn't get over it.
Oh,
She says,
no.
Homer's the odd one, he's the family. She's clear. I wouldn't be a bit surprised that Andrew is his father. And Vernon talked like that. She just was mean to my mother.
She couldn't have any kids?
Oh, yes.
Well, yeah,
She had them, they just didn't have any
They
yet.
didn't have any yet. No.
Oh.
And so
Oh, sure.
that just made my mother hate her worse than ever.
Oh.
To say something like that.
Oh.
There.
And Homer was a little different, you know, he's a little not different,
Not
but
different, but he was smaller.
yeah, he's just a different build and everything the rest of it. But, oh, Mother just cried over that. I think she used to be so mean.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we had a little buggy with and had a light team like a buggy team. We had 1,000 pounds, just 2,000.
See?
Oh.
The children on the buggy and delivered milk into town.
Oh.
We had to start right off the bat, he's in business.
Yeah.
So we got there.
Yeah.
So they said, get your team, get your buggy hooked up. And the buggy was just a little light buggy that the horses could trot along on it.
Yeah.
And in the back was a place where they could travel, there's room for, like you see on these express, people that travel in those, have a
Yeah.
place for luggage on the back.
Yeah,
You want
yeah.
me to hold
And
it?
we'd set all the milk cans in there. We had no way of dividing them up. So we'd fill each
You're
milk can
heavy.
like with 10 gallons,
Yeah.
then smaller cans, then take a measuring can with us that hold a gallon,
Oh.
1 2 quarts,
Oh.
and 1 1/4. We'd say, how much would you like? She said, oh, I'd like a gallon. Then she said, maybe you better sell me 2 while you're at it. So we'd measure out another gallon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just keep those cans.
How much did you sell it for? Do you remember? What was the price?
You know, I think, if I remember right, it was about 20 cents a gallon.
Really?
Because when they get a quart, he'd buy them a quart and charge them a nickel.
Yeah.
And some guys like the glass of cold milk, they drink it. So you better fill it up again
Yeah.
before you
Yeah.
leave.
Yeah. Okay, tell us about life in Kimmer then, about how you used to take a bath in a tub.
Well, we heated, you know one of those double boilers where you said, your mother's got one of those plants in it.
Yeah.
You know, a copper kettle.
Yeah.
Did she get that from us? I think she did. Well, anyway, that's a boiler that sets up, covers 2 lids.
Uh-huh.
And so we heated the water in there with a cold stove. And that's how we heated the house.
Wow.
And so
Did you have running water?
Oh, no.
No.
No, the toilet way outside. As far away from the house as it could be.
Okay, so where did you get your water?
Out of the river.
Every day?
Mhm.
Wow.
Carried it up, just the same as the horses and all the rest drank it.
Wow.
As you know, they say when water runs over rocks, it purifies itself. You ever heard that? That if there's a lot of rocks through there, you don't have to worry much
Yeah.
about it. But you get a place where it's slow and not rocks.
Yeah.
It'll be stagnant.
Yeah.
There'll be dead animals in it and everything.
Yeah. So you just drank the water straight. You didn't boil it first or anything?
No, never thought of such.
Wow.
Wouldn't I have a heck of a
We'd go down to the river and we made this skid. We called it a skid. We took one horse on it, so you didn't have to carry him by hand. We'd set them on that. It was turned up on the front like a ski.
Uh-huh.
We'd set 2-gallon cans on it and take the one horse and
Oh.
tow it up to the house.
Oh.
From the house to the river, be about the same as a block and a half, about from here to Harrison.
Wow.
Yeah, to Harrison.
So you'd you'd bring all the water in from the river and put it in these in this
in the
big
cans.
double boiler and then put it on the
cans
stove.
To start out with the river, we'd tip the can over and let us fill it as easy as it would.
Yeah.
And we'd tip it up on the sand and fill it the rest of the way. And so when we got up there, we set this boiler up on there. And first you'd pour in a couple of gallons, so we didn't have so much lift up on the stove.
Yeah.
Then start heating it. And when it got hot, well, the girls took a bath first, and then the boys used it next. And Heber wanted him to get his bath one day. And so he was just a little guy. He was the youngest one. And he reached up on the boiler. He couldn't quite reach it. And was going to pull out and
on
look
the
at him.
stove.
Oh.
It was up there heating,
Yeah.
and it tipped over on him. And there wasn't a doctor within the town. But you couldn't call him, we had to get him to town.
Oh.
And so then you had a car that was a Chevrolet, a 1918 model Chevrolet.
Oh.
Most of the time you couldn't get it started. It stood so much because you were the only place the battery would be dead.
Yeah.
You didn't have a battery charger you could hook onto in those days.
Oh.
You had to take your battery to a service station and have them charge it
Oh.
and then bring it back.
Oh.
And so they had to hurry Heber to the doctor, and Dr. Marcus. We had no phone. We would have had a phone later, but we had no phone when we got there. And Heber tipped that water in, and so they thought the best thing to do was get him to the doctor as fast as they could.
Yeah.
And I don't know what he used on it, but it sure stopped him from screaming.
Where did he burn himself?
Down his chest,
Oh.
right down it emptied everything but his face,
Oh.
right down his front. And when it started to tip, he couldn't push it back.
Yeah. Is he
He was
scarred? Did he get scarred?
I don't know whether he did or not. I don't know.
How old? He was just little?
Well, we were 10. Homer's 5 years younger, and Heber's 3 years younger.
So he was only 2.
He was only 2 or 3.
Yeah. Huh.
He could be in his 3rd year all right by then.
So by the time you got your bath, it was dirty water.
And we used to sit in front of this oven on the floor, and then open the oven door,
Oh.
and we'd get heat out there, and we'd sit as close as we could to the oven door.
Because it was cold in the
It's
winter.
cold in the house.
Oh.
And so,
Now tell me about the house. Is that the house that burned down after a while?
no,
Oh, okay.
no, that we didn't.
That was the one at
That
the
was the
back
barn
of
that burned
the
down with
house.
the horses in it.
Or back of that new one.
Oh.
No, we're in Kimmer.
Huh?
We're in Kimmer now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, and then it's the
Yeah.
one,
The one Dad built. See, it was 1921, and in the foundation, Dad's gonna have it. But whenever he does anything, wherever you go in and look, he's got A.L. Gray and the date.
Oh, yeah?
And Homer says, all those boards that Dad put his name and date on them?
Mm-hmm.
He said, I've got most of them up to my house.
Oh, cool.
And I said, well, someday I'd like to get one.
Yeah.
Dad had practiced A.L. Gray, big swing, and then he'd go right into his L, and it all carried into one without breaking the line.
it was pretty
Then-
writing.
then, he would have been a good writer.
And he carved it in the wood?
No, took
Just writing.
marking pencil.
Oh,
Now, when
oh.
you're a carpenter, you got a wide pencil that's flat.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's a wide lead.
Uh-huh.
Lay it on the side, you can get it about a quarter of an inch width.
Yeah, yeah,
And Dad would take that pencil. And Homer says, sometime you ought to come up.
yeah.
I was not seeing him down there, but seeing him now would be something
So now when he built a house after you were living on this ranch?
in town.
Oh, okay.
The ranch was, the house already had a ranch for us,
Yeah, yeah,
old as the ranch was.
yeah.
And so anyway,
So tell me about the house he built and then tell me about it getting burned down.
no, that house didn't burn down.
Oh, okay.
The barn did out there.
Oh,
See, the barn had one of those Jackson forks that hang out there and picture play like that.
oh, yeah.
And when it gets up, it goes inside the barn.
Oh.
The door open, it undoes it and
Oh,
drops it.
yeah, yeah.
And it's a Jackson fork. And that was right in the barn. The barn was nicer than the house. When you go out and look at some of these places, they got a beautiful barn, little old house.
Yeah,
Don't mind
yeah,
much.
yeah.
And so,
Did I
up there was so
quit
much ore in the ground, it drew lightning.
Oh.
They said that the lightning will strike here 10 times to 1 in other places. Because it's mineral that draws the lightning.
Oh.
And the horse will draw lightning too. Anytime we'd ride our horse and it started lightning, they'd say, get off your horse and lead him.
Oh, really?
Now,
Okay, so is that how it burned down?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So anyway, the thing was just full of hay. See, in September, you're all through with your crops that quit growing.
Yeah,
Everything's in the barn that you're gonna get for winter.
yeah.
And it was just loaded with hay, and the last forkful wouldn't even go inside.
Oh,
And so when it started lightning and everything, see, we had 10 miles of the Lincoln County Highway that goes through Kemmer and up to Big Piney and over to Evanston
mm-hmm,
to take care of, to keep it graded with the horses. Because in those days, they didn't have all these plows and stuff.
mm-hmm,
It was all done with horses. It was long before the tractors and that.
yeah.
And so we had 10 miles of that to keep graded. And so it started storming, and so they brought the horses into the barn. And unhitched them and brought them to the barn. 8 horses and a little colt. The colt followed her mother everywhere she went.
Mm-hmm.
So they come in and they put them in the barn. And
Didn't
so
you
it
know
started
we
to
had
storm
you?
real hard.
Didn't you
And then
know
it
we
cleared
had
up,
you?
and the lightning just one after another. It took you're gonna
Oh,
see it coming down all over. And all at once we saw the out to the house, the smoke just coming from everything. We can see it just
Did it surprise
from where we
you?
were in delivering milk. We could see
Who
that
was
it
holding
hit
you?
our barn or something.
Oh.
And the smoke was just going
Did
there,
it
black
surprise
smoke.
you? Who?
And so,
It surprised you.
so we had the
Did
buggy
you
with some
do
milk,
that?
and we headed for home as fast as we could go.
and who were you with? Your dad?
No, Heber, or Homer.
Just you and Homer?
Spud died, let me
Oh,
get it straight.
okay.
Homer's still too young to do that.
Yeah, yeah,
So Spud and I being 10 years old.
yeah,
We had left on our birthday the 10th.
yeah, yeah.
And so we hurried out as fast as we could, and they says, hurry and unhitch the horses. And they thought they could hitch them onto a plow and get some dirt to throw on the fire.
Oh,
But the ground was too hard,
bad.
and they were just a light team,
You were
and they
doing
couldn't pull that
that.
plow when it started catching in the ground. and pulling the dirt out.
oh,
It stopped the horses, they weren't heavy enough to pull.
oh.
All of our good horses were in the barn. And the little colt come running out, and then they leave the bottom half of the door so it could go in and out.
Uh-huh,
And then run back to its mother.
Lean on
And the horses
your stomach.
were in there dead. When the lightning comes through the barn,
Lean on
it
your
set the whole barn on fire at once, and they said the reason it did, with that cable going through there, it just followed that from one end to the other.
oh,
It went in this window in the front where the fork is, and just followed that cable right through and just set everything on fire.
oh my
As it went.
gosh. So all your hay
It was gone.
and your horses?
And our chickens. The chicken coop hooked right up against the barn.
Uh-huh.
We used to hook them that way to save building an end in the chicken coop.
Oh, yeah,
It'd slide up against the barn, that was the end.
yeah, yeah,
And we had no fire department, no nothing.
yeah. No running water to spray,
No way
get
to
on
carry
it.
the water. It was too, it'd take you too long to go down and come back and try to throw it.
Oh, so you just had to stand there and while it burned down.
And the horses just smelled, terrible.
Oh,
And the rings on the harnesses, some of that big,
yeah,
on the metal rings,
uh-huh.
and it just melted, that was right down in their flesh.
Wow. So was it during the day or night?
It was, I was delivering milk.
So it was during the day?
It was before noon.
Yeah.
That was the first thing we did in the morning, was take the milk to town.
And where were your parents? Your whole family had to stand there and watch it burn?
Well, yes, but they kept busy trying to save other things, to
Oh.
keep from spreading.
Oh, so it never got to your house?
Oh, no, the house is too far away, you can see it. In
Oh.
the picture, I think it shows them.
Oh,
It'd be half a block away.
oh,
They kind of spread them out in case of a fire, I think, because they had no way of putting down.
yeah.
See, it went right out of the barn into the chicken coop.
But it didn't get to your cows?
Oh, no,
No.
no.
Wow.
They were fine.
See?
Oh, that's
Really?
awful.
The-
So did that ruin your dad's, I mean, then what did you do? You didn't have any money.
No, we didn't have any money, and we had mortgaged Grandpa's ranch in Randolph, and then put a second mortgage on it.
Oh,
When you got cows, you gotta have milk, or you gotta have a bull.
oh,
And the first thing about, when you buy a bull, you've gotta get a good one.
uh-huh,
And in those days, they look at a bull's back,
uh-huh.
and if you had a wide flat back on top that you could lay a plate on, it wouldn't fall off. They says, he's a good bull, he's got a lot of good in him,
Uh-huh,
well-bred bull.
yeah,
And they give you papers on the bull showing that he was a registered bull and all
Oh.
this and all that.
mhm.
And the bull cost $800
Whoa,
for just one bull.
whoa,
And so we had a bull's corral up there. That you would put a bull and keep him in the corral.
Uh-huh.
He never sees the cows until you can use him.
oh,
And he can smell a cow that's bulling. That's what they call it when they're in heat.
uh-huh, uh-huh,
He can smell her, she's a mile away.
Uh-huh.
It's like the deers, you know.
Yeah.
You can smell the deer
yeah,
down the next canyon. The buck's canyon. The big one, when you get down to this big buck, and he's taking range, taking charge of the whole thing. And he books the young ones out.
huh.
He doesn't want
And so, you had a bull,
it. We had this bull in the bullpen.
uh-huh,
And so Uncle Mary says, I believe I can lead him out. And then he changed his nose. and a chain on him.
Yeah.
You had to jerk the chain, that was to get his attention.
Yeah.
And all that was for so you can control him. Because when he's in heat, he wants to get to that cow.
Yeah,
In spite
yeah.
of hell and high water.
Yeah.
You can say that. And so he started to leave
Look at this.
Uncle Nor. And Uncle Nor jerked her up on him a couple of times, let him know he still had a hold of it. And the bull charged him,
Oh no.
because he was gonna get that cow, and he knew he was being held back.
Oh.
So he shoved Uncle Nor, and Nor fell backwards.
Dale, you gotta quit talking.
So we got those cows to pay for, and we haven't got a dime, and we haven't got a horse. So he said, how would it be if I give you a certain amount of money for your interest? And he said, we're in debt so big, I don't know if I'll ever get it out, but if you wanna take $500, I'll give you $500 for your interest. And so Dad said, well, it's better than
Stoop over and let him see you talking.
He said, it's better than nothing. So she never did get the $500, neither did he.
Oh.
Never. And so that made Mother feel bad, real bad. To think Dad died May the 5th of 44, and they'd never heard from him then, and never since. So she never got a dime of it.
Oh.
One day I was tuning his car, and he said, I got out a check today and clear the bank for $50,000.
Oh.
And like, I'm almost saying, why don't you give Mother 5 of it?
Yeah.
But then I didn't. I wished I had. And so he did right well. They come back to Randolph, see.
Oh.
And so what he did, he hired an old cattle truck. I don't know what kind it was. And he just brought them back 3 or 4 at a time.
Oh.
Skid all of them together.
Oh.
And that way you could bring them right back same day and start
I'm
milking.
not as good
Yeah.
a talker.
Didn't lose out on anything. And so
I'm
we
not
came
as
back to
good a
Randolph
talker. Did that.
and had the ranch,
Sure.
everything fine. And so
So what did you guys do after it all burned down? How did you guys make
we
it?
moved into Frontier, what they call the flats.
Huh.
Down on the flats was kind of like out in West Ogden. It
Oh.
was just any old house.
Mm-hmm.
And so we moved into a house out there that didn't have a, just set right on the ground, no foundation or nothing. And we stayed down there until we could get up, move uptown, because we could afford to move uptown. And so Fat Smith, he built homes. And he said to Dad, if you're a good carpenter and want to come work for me, he said, I'll let you start a home, and then put your labor in it,
Oh.
work for me and turn your labor
Oh.
in for payments on the house.
Oh.
So I'll give you a day's labor every time you want to work.
Mm.
And so Dad started the house, but things were so bad in Cameron because I haven't got to the mine exploding yet.
Okay.
He just couldn't get enough money in his house, and so when we left there, he didn't have any. He said, "I'll buy your equity out
Oh.
and let you give you a little change in your pocket."
Oh.
But we had no equity because we owed a lot more than.
Oh.
He just couldn't give us a dime on it,
Oh.
so he just took the house back scot-free.
Oh.
Dad sure felt bad. He put a lot of hard labor in it.
Yeah.
He'd work till it was so dark you couldn't see. And then, now they got floodlights and everything,
Yeah.
can work right through the night
Yeah.
if you want to.
Yeah.
And Grandma would work right with him.
Working on the
Grandma
house.
Grandpa was a good worker, but it was Grandma that was the, what, Phil? She was the pusher.
Was she?
Grandpa got discouraged
Yeah.
and felt that, well, you wonder how he could have stood
Yeah.
it all but Grandma didn't. Well, she got discouraged, but she still went on working.
Mhm. And she helped him by saying, "Let's keep going." Huh.
So we turned the house back to Fat Smith and just called it, thanked him for being so good to us.
And then where'd you go?
And we borrowed $65. And up there it's so cold at nights, it's like Randolph, that you have to put a car inside or you can't start it next morning.
Uh-huh.
And so Dee got a job with Fat Smith's boy. He had the Chrysler garage there. And he went there and told him, he says, "Do you need a mechanic?" Well, Dee didn't know anything about a car. And he said, "No, but I sure need a man to take care of the cars that come in at night."
Oh.
He said, "What you do, you keep the lights all on. And when people drive up to come in to see what kind of place you are, they say, hey, would there be any chance I can put my car here tonight?
Oh.
Can't leave it outside, I'll never get it started."
Oh.
And so he says, "Well, that's what I'm here for." And so Dee sometimes would have the garage filled right up for a morning.
Oh. And
see-
so he would work at nights.
Mhm.
And
And
Dee
so-
met
Matha?
Matha. She was a waitress, and they said she was really a good waitress.
She was so good, she never carried a paper around to write down what they ordered.
Oh.
And remembered where to start on the table. And she said, I'd just go clockwise around it. And it would start there, and that's the way it went.
And he met her up there?
Yes, at the,
She was tending tables, waiting.
and she was a good waitress, they said. I never saw her.
Uh-huh.
So he borrowed
And
Dad's
Grandma-
car and come down to Kimmer, from Kimmer to Salt Lake and got married,
Oh, oh.
and then got the car.
And so where did you move to?
We moved to on those flats.
Yeah?
Once we go uptown.
Oh, that was
Oh,
cute.
So-
uptown.
That was a new one.
While I was on the flats,
That was a new one.
we were down there a couple of years or more.
Oh,
We got a neighbor who come over at night, and she said, "You want on the phone long distance?" We didn't have a phone down the flats.
Uh-huh.
And she said, "I think it's a problem. I think they got a problem." And Dad went to the phone, and Aunt Florbell died. That was his younger sister.
oh,
She was married to George Wilson in Randolph,
oh.
and they ran a store that had anything you wanted, just a little butcher shop, but he carried everything you could think of.
Uh-huh.
Like if you want shoelaces, he had that in the butcher shop, no matter what you want.
And
He
that's
said,
where
"I've got it."
Grandma left Homer
No,
wrap. Huh?
that was Livingston.
Wasn't
He's
that?
got nothing in there at all for women, for quilts or anything, blankets. Didn't I tell you about that?
No, tell me about that.
But anyway, I'll get over this.
Okay.
And so Dad come back and he says Florbell died. And Uncle George Wilson, Florbell was his next younger sister, and Ruth was youngest and she was next. Why, he was a funny guy, he had such a temper. He'd get mad at him for a whole week. He'd stay in his store a whole week and just eat crackers and cheese and stuff like that and not even go home. He had a bed in the back room. And they'd say, "Haven't you and Florbell made it up yet?" And he said, "Oh, you can't get along." You can't get along with him and he can't get along without him. And he was just kind of an honor guy. We never cared much for him as kids. We'd go in the other store where Flo Jackson worked and Mr. Hiram Norris. We'd trade him eggs for candy and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Anytime we had any eggs, he'd give us bars or whatever.
Oh.
And so George Wilson, he was just for George.
Uh-huh.
He
Uh-huh.
wasn't the kind of guy that could. Now, Saul Conley, another one of the relations up there. When we went up there, I was in my Model 8, and he taped from my steering wheel over to the gear shift.
Uh-huh.
I taped them so tight together, with just one roll of tape after another,
What?
just one on top of the other, so thick. When I didn't have a knife to cut it all off,
Why'd you do that?
just to have fun. He was always pulling tricks on people.
Well, that was
taped-
the son. That was the son, wasn't it, that
Oh.
did that?
Oh no, that's the
I think you need to close that door.
Okay, just
her funeral and that.
There it
And
is.
then
There it is.
I think Dad's the only one that went back down to it.
Oh.
He had to ride a horse down to it was about 50 miles
Oh.
to go to be down there that day.
Oh.
And anyway, when he came back, he said, "George is looking at my other sister, Aunt Rachel."
Oh.
So he married sisters.
Oh. How long after his wife died did he marry
I
her?
can't tell you exactly. I just don't.
Not very long, huh?
No. But he married Aunt Rachel, and I can't talk about her yet.
Well, don't go any
If I got into that, she brought her stuff out of that store down for me to sell, and I said, "Take it to Spud. He's working in the Farmers Union.
Uh-huh.
He knows what it's worth." "No, I want I trust you to treat a widowed lady fine."
Uh-huh.
Well, Phil never drank.
Yeah.
And
Phil
see,
did.
Woodrow Wilson wasn't worth a dime. He wasn't, when he had a funeral up there, he came down the street so fast, and in the I forgot another year, the Oldsmobile, and before it stopped him, he hit 7 cars. Bumped off, they were all parked in church,
Oh.
and they were parked out there like this.
Was he
bounced-
drunk?
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
He bounced
he
off of
drank.
that car and hit the next one, the next one, the next one.
Ah.
And at the funeral, he stood there in the garage and never come inside the house at all. And Kathy says, the reason he didn't, Dad, he was too drunk to move away from the wall. He stood in the garage with the garage doors open, leaned against the wall like that.
Oh.
He wasn't worth a dime.
Huh. And this was his wife's funeral. Whose funeral?
Woodrow,
It
Oh.
was his aunt.
Oh, his
huh?
aunt.
Wasn't
yes,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Aunt Rachel was his aunt.
Oh,
She
yeah.
was the second. His mother was Aunt Florbell.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And, he was just no good.
Oh,
Huh.
you're a good kid.
And so the guy got up in his funeral, and asked him that lived in Randolph all his life, and he said, "Couldn't you speak at his funeral?" And so he got up and he said, "Well, I don't know whether I could or not, but he said, I'll do my best." So he got up and he says, "Now we're here to honor Woodrow Wilson." And some days he wasn't as bad as others. He couldn't think of anything. He started out that way. Someday he wasn't as bad as other days.
And that was all he could think.
He just couldn't say anything good about it. Because there was 500 people in town. Everybody could go to the funeral and stand there at Rachel's funeral.
Oh, I think you're a good talker.
Because everybody knows everybody.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
just to come from funeral, they can just walk over to church.
yeah, yeah.
And he says, I don't know what to say. But some days he wasn't as bad as others, was he?
Okay, now tell me about life on the flats and how it was when you moved up to the city and stuff, up to
We
town.
moved up there and
How long had you been in Kemmer when you moved back into town?
I'm almost sure she died in 26.
Okay.
And so we came up there in 21.
Dear.
Oh, okay. So then she died in 26, and then when did you move out of the flats up into town?
Right after that.
Oh, okay.
They couldn't get us on the phone, so we came uptown.
Oh, okay.
Dad said, we gotta get up there.
Yeah,
And I've got no way to get to work.
yeah.
And you had to walk in, like it'd be like from walking out in West Ogden to come into Washington Avenue. Not
Wow.
that far.
Every day you walked that far.
And so he said, I've got to get closer to my work. And so Fat Smith said, well, we'll find you a place up there. And so some people with the name of Freeman. And this Freeman was thinking about moving. And he said, well, why don't you bring your stuff up, your furniture that you got and put in the basement. When we move, just bring it upstairs.
Uh-huh.
And so Fat Smith said, now the lot next to him, this is all my ground here.
Uh-huh.
We can start your house on there anytime you want to. And Dad said, I haven't got 5 cents to my name right now.
Oh,
But he said, if you want to go ahead and get the foundation in, I'll take care of that for you.
uh-huh.
And so
I'll get that.
floated up there. And it took 198 men killed him.
Oh, let me go.
So Dad said to Dee, he's working in Fat Smith garage, do you think you'd have $65 I could borrow? And he said, sure. And so he borrowed $65 and we moved down to Ogden. But first Dad hitchhiked a ride down here and found a house at 2112 Monroe that needed shingling. And he went to the house and said, do you own this place? And they said, no. They gave me the fellow his name that owned it. It really needs shingles. And so he called him up and he knew down Uena. And he said, yes. He says, I'll furnish the shingles and I'll give you 3 months rent for shingling it.
Huh.
So we moved down to 2112 Monroe. Then when that time was about up, Dad looked at another house at 409 26th Street. No, 409. Our shop was 409, just across the street
Oh,
on the even side. Anyway, he found that house. It needed shingling bad, and asked him if they thought they could get shingling. He said, well, talk to the guy who owns it. So he got us another job, and after our 3 months was up, we went to this house and lived there. And then we went to 21 to right across from Lindquist
oh,
over in Adams. They were like 2730 and we were 2731 across the street. And we got a house there to shingle. And then they took on a fellow to live in the basement to help with the rent.
oh.
And so we lived there and
So how old were you when you moved to Ogden?
let's see, I was 10 when I left. I never stopped to figure it out. We came in about 1927, I think.
Okay.
Almost sure.
So you were around 16 or something.
And so we shingled that and for Stevens out in the Uinta. And then the folks said, Dad thought he could sell wash machines here.
Mm-hmm.
And so Fred Shaw says, if you want to put up a little shop, get a little building, he says, I'll help you with the rent until you can get going.
Mm-hmm.
And so they got a little place down there. And so Dad went up to places like Kimmer and Randolph to sell to people he knew.
Oh.
He sold a few, but he had a double hernia and he couldn't lift them on the back.
Oh.
And so I took his car down to a blacksmith shop on 23rd Street, and I said to Jack, hey, could you put some kind of a rack on here that would open, when you let the handle down, it would lower it to the ground,
Mm-hmm.
kind of on a ratchet like.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you pull it back up, it'd raise it, the weight, like a wash machine. And he said, if you want to help me with it, we could, just like that. And so we built him a rack that when he'd bring this handle down like that, it was just like lowering it to the ground.
Mm.
Only the front edges hit the ground like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if he had it so that he'd keep the weight on the back wheels, he could tip it up like you do
Yeah.
any machine, and then roll it on the back wheels like a cart.
Yeah.
And then let the other wheels rest on it, and then bring it up with the handle.
Yeah.
And he could handle it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so he did that for a while, and it just sold to a few friends,
Mm-hmm.
and that fell through. And so then he worked for McClanahan's clothing store. And Dad didn't know anything about measuring up for a suit or anything. And I just got the best of him.
Mm-hmm.
And so Anyway, we skipped a little bit. He tried and tried to make some money that way. And they come and took his car away from him.
Oh.
He couldn't make the payments.
Oh.
And so, then of course, we was living I know the address really well, like 728, right across from George Kennedy, came from Randolph.
Oh.
And right, do you remember George Handley, the lawyer?
Nope.
No. We lived next door to him
Hmm.
on 27th, or 25th Street. And so, Dad says, I think what I'll do is quit trying to sell, but they come and took his car.
Hmm.
And I was riding a bike down to Lindquist at night and going on night calls for $1.
Tell us about that, Grandpa.
They'd pay me $1 to go out on a night call so that Clyde and Carl wouldn't have to go.
And what would you do on a night call?
We'd go out and pick up a body and bring it back to the mortuary. Joe Carlson and I.
Ugh.
They'd die at their home and we'd go bring them into the mortuary
Oh.
or at the hospital.
Wow.
It was always best when they died at the hospital because the nurse took care of things.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, and so,
So $1 a call.
uh,
How often did you go out?
sometimes 3 times in the night.
Oh.
And you know, most people die between 1 and 3. That's when the crisis was the lowest. If they made it, they live enough another day.
Oh, really?
Or now they won't unplug them when they want to.
Yeah.
They let you die when they're ready. Almost, you know.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we had this deal that running the bike down there at night and getting the hearse out of the garage and going picking up Joe Carlson down to the Lindquist. We'd go on the call.
Oh.
And so they said, if you want to come and work for us steady, why, we'll pay you salary.
Huh.
And so Dad says, I wonder if you could borrow enough money to get in the car. He needed 3 payments, $90.
Oh.
It was $30 a payment.
Mm-hmm.
And so just starting there, I'd been working on going on night calls.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, John's dad and Carl and Clyde's dad, see, the mother died and he got married a second time, C.J. Lindquist.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was just like a dad to me.
Hmm.
He just couldn't treat me better. And he'd take me over to Watson Tanner's and charge the clothes to fit him. He says, fit this boy from his underwear out.
Really? And he was your boss at Lindquist?
Mhm.
Well, how
He
ni-
was the head one there.
And you were
Carl.
just like a teenager.
Yeah. And he says, fit this boy with his underwear out. And over to Tanner's, Watson Tanner's.
Wow.
He'd say, this boy needs some overshoes for winter and one of those scarves you hang on your neck, you know, and a heavier coat.
Wow.
And he'd say, fix the charge to the company, 2620 Washington.
I'll bet you hadn't had a lot of that kind of clothes
Oh,
before.
never. And so Dee said, Dee went to barber school
Mm-hmm.
in Salt Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, hey, do you think that there'd be a chance that he never had a thing, nothing. He said, I haven't got a pot to pee in. Window to throw it out of. And he said, do you think they'd loan me $500? I can buy that shop up on Harrison
Mm-hmm.
at 2317 at Harrison.
Mhm.
Just the third, you know where it was across
Yeah.
the old D hospital.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He said, I can, not the building, just buy
Yeah.
the business and all of the equipment for $500.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Phelps wants to leave town and go back to Detroit, where he came from,
Mm-hmm.
but he wants cash. And so I went back to Lindquist and I said, I've got another question. And he said, what is it? And I went right to Mrs. Lindquist and to C.J., that's Carl's dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, my brother's got a chance. He's been to barber school in Salt Lake, and now he's here, looking for a job.
Mm-hmm.
But this building come up on 2117 Harrison, and he's got a chance to get it for $500. Not the building, just the business and equipment. And they said, we're just joking, we'll take it out of your pay if you don't pay us.
Mm-hmm.
And so they wrote me out a check to give him
Wow.
$500.
Wow.
And so, getting back to D again, when this house was all paid for, the guy up here said, how are you going to pay for it? And I says, in 3 payments. And so when, see, $5,000 each time.
Mm-hmm.
And so D said, how you come in your house? And I said, I got 1 payment left of $5,000. And he says, I'll dig it up for you. So I paid my house off.
Wow.
And I says, hey, now I'm going to pay you interest. And he says, did I pay you interest on the money you gave me? And I said, 500 is different than 5,000. And he
What
said,
house was that you were paying off, Grandpa?
Here, this one.
This one here. Wow.
Cost us $15,000, the street and everything.
You're kidding.
A little bit less than that, few.
And you just made the payments in 3 chunks of $5,000 each.
And that was our last payment, we cleared it up.
Wow.
And Olivia was such a good saver, if you can call it.
Yeah.
Because she knew how to handle money.
Yeah.
That I said, we're going to buy a new car as soon as the house is paid for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went down to Browning Chevrolet And I said, what would a new Fleetline Chevrolet cost me? That was the best one.
Mhm.
And he said, well, he said, how are you going to pay for it? They didn't want you to pay cash. They would like you to pay it on a payment, so they make more money charging
yeah.
it or payments.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to pay for it when I get it. When I walk out the door, it'll be paid for.
Mhm.
And so I talked to them. They told me the car was $1,800 and they'd make it to me, a clean deal, for like 14 something.
Wow.
So I said, when I buy it, I'm going to look around just a little bit first.
Mhm.
I'll just give you the 14 for it, and have it paid for when it leaves here.
Mhm.
And so I went over to kind of on a Nosmobile. And over to Rulin Woods. I got pretty friendly with him. I knew him quite well. And I said, I'm thinking about buying a new Chev. And he said, which one? And I said, Fleetline, the best one.
Mhm.
And he said, I can almost sell you an Oldsmobile for that.
Huh.
And as you talk is cheap, but can I? And he said, now look, I'm not a salesman. I'm just running the place. So I can give you any price I damn please. You make me an offer. And I said, well, I wouldn't make you an offer. But I said, I'll tell you, I can get this Chevrolet, which is $1,800 and some odd dollars,
Mhm.
for 14.
Mhm.
How close can you come? And he said, if I come within your 14, your $300, would you take an O's? And I said, you bet.
Huh?
And he come down to within $300.
Wow.
And nobody had the money saved. We paid in cash.
Good. And so you got it. All right. Let me turn it off just.
We were up the stairs. We had apartment 5 and he had number 1. And the Lindquist would go home and call it a day. But we being the cheap help, any call came in was up to us. So we got to call out the poor farm in Roy. They called it the poor farm in those days. And we get out there, and the fellow had left his room and walked up the railroad tracks, just trying to get away. And the train hit him and cut his head off. And it was in the dark at night, and we could find and couldn't find it. So we brought him without a head. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's a sign downstairs says, if you need any help, go to apartment 5. It was my night to be on duty. And they come up and knocked on the door. And he said, I got something for you. And he just handed me a big roll of newspaper about that big. And instead of me taking it, because it scared me a little bit, I said, bring it in. He laid it on the kitchen table and started unwrapping it. It was a man's head. I just about died. I just couldn't believe you were all wrapped up until you had it on the table.
Wasn't that one of the things that made you decide I'm not gonna do this forever?
No, it was a kid that fell in the river out there, Clyde Lenn's boy. And anyway, I took it downstairs, and I was just shaking. I just wondered I didn't drop it twice getting downstairs. And I took it down there and put it in the embalming room and come back upstairs.
Mhm.
And that made me so mad to think a guy do a stunt like that.
Yeah.
Just really upset me.
Tell us about the boy that drowned.
This fellow was a barber down there, that fellow from Randolph. They was in together. And he had a boy about 8 years old. And it was in the spring, and the kid went over in the Ogden River at 19th and Washington, and he was looking over the edge and fell in. And carried him downstream, and so they hunted and couldn't find him. And after the spring water went down, he was on a sandbar down in West Weber. And so they called us Lindquist to come to get him. And so I went down there, and I said, where's the little fellow? He said, we'll show you. And he was still on the sandbar. His partly covered. And I said, can I get one of you fellows to help me carry him over to the car? It was about a half mile. Not in your life, he said. He said, we don't get paid for that. And there wasn't one of them that helped me. So I'd carry him a little ways, and by then, he was just a mess. He was just full of blowflies and maggots, because he laid there in the sun all those days. So I'd carry him a little ways, and then I'd lay him down on the ground and I'd rest, and then I'd carry him a little further. And when I got over to the car, I came into the office, and I said, I said I was going to quit this job, but I know I'm going to. So when my vacation comes, don't even offer it to me, because I'm not taking it. And so I just made up my mind I wasn't going to stay. So I quit there on the 15th of June. And I'd already checked into another job, ready to go to work.
But Dale had already told him.
But I just hated to tell them. They just treated me so nice.
Yeah.
They just, like I was one of the family.
And Walt was so anxious for Dale to get the job.
Oh, one of your friends wanted the job at Lindquist?
Yes, oh, he
I went down
loved
to his service station. He worked for Gene Jones's gas station. And I said, well, I'm going to leave Lindquist. I've given him the final word. And he says, when? I said, well, I told him it'd give him 2 weeks. And they said, well, now, if you got something you want to go to, you don't need to stay 2 weeks. And I said, well, I'll stay 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But I got a friend down here that would just love my job. He lives in Morgan. And they said, well, we don't get too much business from Morgan. Let's talk to him. And I said, he is so fussy that you couldn't wash the ceiling in a room, in the embalming room, and satisfy me. He'd have to go over it again. He's just so neat and clean.
Mm-hmm.
And when he buys shirts, he buys 6 shirts at Nice in a box, you know,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just buying one. The same with Florsheim shoes. He buys a brown pair and a black pair. And when Ray and Delora got married in 1941, they said, could you be our best man? I said, don't believe I've got a suit and a good pair of shoes. And Walt said, borrow mine.
Wow.
And he had a brand new Fred M. Nice suit, just fit me perfect,
Huh.
and 7.5 shoes,
Hmm.
size, and they fit me.
So you were the best man.
So I was the best man in his clothes. But he just couldn't have treated me better.
Hey, Dad, tell him about driving the ambulance and taking everybody in the back end of the rodeo and that.
Oh, when they had the rodeo, we had to have an ambulance out in case somebody got hurt.
This is when you worked at Linquist?
Yes. And so
They were the only people that had ambulance.
we'd load all of our friends in the ambulance and just drive in. Just wait for them going
The
in.
mortuary had the ambulance, not the hospital.
So you just put your friends in the back and got in free. Oh,
We
that's
did
funny.
that. Never missed one. Never missed one.
And all our friends that had babies came home in the ambulance because
Oh.
I borrowed the ambulance and
Thale.
bring them home.
they'd let Thale take the ambulance and bring whoever it was home and the new baby.
Oh,
He
Marvel
brought
and
me
Bruce saw our
home with
kids, which was
Juanita.
this one.
oh,
And in 9 months to the day, they had Mitzi.
oh.
So Bruce went home, and there she was with her pencil. I'm waiting for him. Oh, I'm glad you showed up. After seeing that baby, I'm going so bad. 9 months to the day that he was born.
Okay, Grandpa, you didn't tell me about the J.C. Penney thing. Tell me that story, and then I won't bug you.
When we moved to Kimmerway, we just couldn't make a living for right off the bat. You didn't have no customers to deliver milk or nothing. And so we immediately started scouring the town to see if we get customers. And so, so we used to think if we could pass handbills, we could make a little money that way. So we went to the number one store, was J.C. Penney's in Salt Lake, to see if we get a job. And he says, well, I could use a couple of good boys. He said, these boys are I'm finding my bills set for the weekend, putting a culvert and stuff like that to know how people aren't getting them. So we delivered these handbills. We had like 500,
So they were like advertising papers.
saying what the sale was going to be Saturday.
I see.
Yeah, in Kimmer.
Flyers.
And so we'd go to Sublette, and number 2 Sublette, number 1 Sublette, and up to the I'm trying to think of names of the mines. Susie Mine. All of them were named after his family.
Oh.
These mines were.
Hmm.
And we'd go to each one and deliver the papers and just about run out.
Hmm.
And so he had that sale that weekend on a Saturday, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next time we went in, the next week we went back to see if we still had a job. And he says, hey, he says, that was the biggest sale we've had. Showing those handbills got to the homes where they should belong.
Oh.
He says, you guys have got a steady job as long as you want it.
How old were you?
Just over 10,
Oh my gosh.
about 11.
Do you know how much you got paid?
I don't remember.
Not very much.
No, I think he paid pretty good.
Did he?
We were sure tickled to get that money.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe Piz, he had a bakery there. And his boy Herman worked for the old man Joe Piz. And he says, hey, I understand you got a good job at J.C. Penney. He was right next door, see?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, come over to my house, over to our place. Maybe Dad will give you a job. And so this kid, he just started handing us out donuts or whatever we wanted to eat, all for free, you know. We didn't want another job. We stood there and eating donuts as fast as we could eat them until we wasn't interested. And I felt so bad I hated to go back. Because I took his bride, didn't stay.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one more story. Tell me about when you got married and how your friends came up and pulled a trick on you or something.
My family.
Oh, your family?
We stayed in the, what was the kitty corner? No,
Oh, yeah, the Temple Square.
Temple Square.
That was new then.
It was room like on 331. I like threes. I was always lucky for me.
And so this is on your wedding night?
Yeah.
You got married in the temple, and then you went over to the hotel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And at 3 o'clock in the morning, the doorbell rang. And Bennett said, it's just me. I just thought I'd come and see you, just to visit you.
3 in the
When we opened
morning.
the door, the whole works walked in and stayed the rest of the night.
Oh, no.
Oh, I put out with it.
On your wedding night.
Yeah.
Now, I thought somebody took your clothes or you
Oh,
took...
that was D when he got married to Kimber.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me that.
Oh,
He
that was the
lost
darndest
all
thing.
his clothes.
You ever heard of chivalrying them?
Mm-mm.
Chivalrying is when you take them out and do something to them and then turn them loose.
Oh.
Anyway, they took Dee up to the county bridge, which was 5 miles from Kimber. See, he got married and borrowed Dad's car and came to Salt Lake and got married. And when he came back, they waited for him that night. He didn't even get with me then.
Oh.
They took him up to county bridge, took all of his clothes off, everything.
Oh.
And there, all there was on both sides was just no homes up in there at all.
Oh.
Just tall sagebrush. When you'd ride a horse, your feet would hit the sagebrush. It
Uh-huh.
was that tall.
Uh-huh.
It's in a saddle, it'd scrub your seat. And so there was hardly any cars up there, but when one came, he had to run and hide till it went by. They put that
Everybody's
printer-
nightmare.
They painted these with printer's ink. He said it was the damnedest stuff to wear off. He said you couldn't wash it off, so he just had to wear it
So
off.
this was after his wedding,
No, no.
but before.
As soon as they come home from the wedding,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
After his wedding.
yeah. After his wedding,
They
but.
call it chivalry, and they break them up before they get together. That night.
Oh, that's funny.
And Mason was just fit to be tied. And they didn't. She didn't have no idea where they took him up the county bridge.
Oh, that's
And when
funny.
anybody come by, he'd run and hide in the sagebrush till they'd come by.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Had Tom Kitty. He was half Indian or more. And he had a cabin up the head of right at the very head of the big creek. You go right at the end of the creek where it come out of the ground. That's where Kitty's cabin was. And so I said, I'd like to go over there sometime and go in that cabin. This is in Randolph, see? Back in Randolph.
Uh-huh.
And so we went in there, Spud and I, and looked around, and there's those pipes they hang a hand to you when you smoke a pipe apiece.
Uh-huh.
Real one.
Hmm.
And I don't know why I took that home with me. And when I got home, I was scared to tell anybody, and I hid it in the basement.
Oh.
Our basement it was just dug out for a room if you ever want to put one down there.
Uh-huh.
It never was finished.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're down in the basement, you could crawl up on that dirt, and there was dirt all around it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took it down there to hid it. And so one time I went up to Kimmer, and I said to the people, I knocked on the door, and I said, could I go down to your basement? And he says, what do I go down my basement for? And I said, we used to live here. And he said, did. And he said, who was the people next door? And I said, Freeman's. That was their name then. It's still there. And I said, Freeman's was there, and Mrs. I knew the lady on the other side. Anyway, so I let him know I knew the house
Yeah.
and all about it.
Yeah.
All that dirt. Because I knew exactly where I put it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't there.
Oh.
It wasn't?
I couldn't find it to save me. And I finally give up. I said, well, thanks a million. I couldn't find it. But I didn't tell her what I was looking for.
Huh. So you never did find it.
I sure felt bad about it, but I know it was one of those with the ribbon on it and everything and it hung
Yeah.
underneath when you
Yeah.
smoked it.
Probably one they used at Custer's last time.
I sure felt bad about stealing it. And I swore right then, if I ever steal anything again, and I use this French, I hope somebody kicks me in the ass. It's so hard it hurts me. It really hurts me.
Grandpa, tell us one more thing about how you used to cut a piece of ice out of Bear Lake and use it all winter and bury it in the barn and all that.
In the cellar.
Every winter.
Okay, tell us that.
Oh, yeah. They'd go up there with horses, saying it'd be 18 inches deep. Take a saw and cut down in and just cut a square piece out, a little bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 18 inches deep this way, but about that size.
Mm-hmm.
The reason they didn't make it a bit larger, it's too heavy to carry.
Oh.
And then they'd bring it over and put it in the wagon. First we lay a full layer of sand, or sawdust rather,
Mm-hmm.
on the bottom of the wagon. Then cover it up
And what'd you cut it out with, a saw?
and saw.
Huh.
You did all by hand, no.
And then you lifted it out.
Mhm.
Wow.
Have ice tongs that you push down the side
Oh.
of it and lift it up, carry it, and put
Uh-huh.
it in the wagon. Then another layer of sawdust and put another layer in.
Huh.
And we used what they called a double bed wagon. It was two boards high and it was about 10 inches high.
Uh-huh.
So it was about 20 inches deep. We'd stack that high and then arch the middle ones and take them back
Huh.
home to Randolph
And you'd, where would you put it?
in the cellar and then cover it with sawdust. And then the spring was just almost as good as when you put it there.
And so then did you put your meat and stuff down with
No.
it to keep it cold?
No, just for ice cream and stuff like that.
Oh.
No, in the house we had a refrigerator and put blocks of it in there. A
Oh.
wood refrigerator
Oh.
that had a place in the bottom to set the ice in.
Uh-huh.
And it was only, I don't think it was much higher than, maybe 4 feet.
Huh.
And
So,
about that
When
wide.
you say a wooden refrigerator, it wasn't electric.
Oh, no,
It was just a box.
we never had electricity.
But
It was-
they were on legs.
Just a box on legs,
With the door.
like an ice chest.
Yeah.
Kind of
Just
what
And
we
they
would think.
delivered it to the door, but,
Well, they never delivered there.
huh?
Nobody had one that delivered.
But in Ogden, like.
Well,
they
in
had-
Ogden.
Oh, in
they
Ogden
did.
they did, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But if you
Mhm.
wanted more
I
ice
like
to
to
it, you had to go over and cut some out.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd have ice for the thrashers in the fall, which
Huh.
is usually in September.
For the thrashers?
Yeah, they'd come and cut your grain, your wheat, and your barley.
So you needed it to sharpen them?
No,
What
to
for?
make them drinks and ice cream.
Oh,
and
the
stuff.
men.
Yeah, we had
Oh.
a churn, ice cream freezer,
Oh.
and we'd have each one turn it for a while. They got tired, another guy turn it.
Oh.
They weren't electric.
Oh.
You just keep winding, winding,
Yeah.
winding. When it got hard to turn, it was about set, ready to set.
Uh-huh.
Then you'd cover it over with ice and just leave it set
Huh.
until it was ready to eat it.
Huh.
And
Okay.
that would really freeze it hard.
Huh.
We went down to her basement, and she had put up strawberries. She just had bottles and bottles of strawberries down there. And then they covered it over and leave it, and it wouldn't freeze in the winter. 'Cause that kept the cold out. You just keep it cold, but it wouldn't freeze the stuff. And so while they were uptown, we decided to go try the strawberries. And so we went outside where the sun would hit us, and leaned against the building and sat and each ate a full quart of strawberries.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I've never been able to use it.
And he never eaten them since.
It just made me so sick of them, I couldn't stand them. Until just lately, I just started eating them good. Horses on it. We towed the back wagon, hooked two wagons together, and then four horses up in front, pulled them all. So we come down from Randolph and come down. We ended up by the hardware ranch. There was no hardware ranch there.
Mm-hmm.
But then come on down the canyon because there's just a sheep trail down there. But we'd get down the road a long ways with these horses and run into a place where we had what we called them flash floods,
Mm-hmm.
where we'd washed one so deep that you couldn't get across it no way. And Spud had me go up there with my four-wheel drive. I said, if I ever got a four-wheel drive, I'll bet I'd cross that. And I thought it would be too deep, too hard. And so Spud says, let's give it a try. And we got it down in there, and when it got settled in the bottom, the front was against that bank, and the back was against this one.
Oh.
And it was just wedged in there.
Oh.
Hadn't hit the bottom yet. We
Oh.
thought it was too wide. It was wide enough to sit down in. And it just hung in there.
Mm.
And we worked all the rest of the day trying to get that thing out. And I had one of those little army shells. It's about that long with a little green handle. I still got the shell down here. in the basement. Little green handle. And it's shaped like a
Yep.
yeah, like a hole, kind of like that on the end. I brought it home. And it's still in my garage down here. But anyway, we dug that thing and dug it. And so we finally got it turned around so we could go down this creek and stay right in till we get out. And so one day Spud says, hey, let's try this across by Southwick kind of anyway, they had a mill up there, and they just cut certain trees, and they would cut boards off for you, whatever you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, if you had a tree you wanted to cut up, they'd take it up to Southwick's, and they'd cut it just like you wanted it.
Hmm.
And so Spud said, let's go down by Southwick's mill. And I said, why? And he said, I always wanted to cross there. And I said, you can't cross there on a horse. They'd sink out of sight. And he said, I think if you hit it fast enough, we can make it. So I give it the gas and give it the go. And so it got right out by in the middle of the pond. It wasn't pond, it was ground when you walk
Swampy.
here. Water would come out over there, squeeze out. And it just settled in right to the running
Ew.
boards. And so we sat there and let it idle, and the wheels, all four wheels would just turn like that. So we walked down to Randolph, and Uncle North said, do you know how far it is to Southwick Mill? And I said, it's almost 14 miles. And he said, that's just about what it is. And so he said, well, how long a chain you got? And one? I said, I've got one long chain. It's a chain they drop stuff on airplanes with. It's a strap about that wide.
Mm.
And man, they were strong. You know anything about them? How strong they are?
I don't know how strong.
I don't believe they'd ever break. It was pulling with a car. And I got that, and I said, it's about 50 feet long. He said, well, that won't be near enough. I can't get near that close to you if you're in the middle. So he found a couple more chains, and we took his international truck up there with dual wheels on the back and the heaviest truck he owned. And Nora looked at me and he says, hell, we'll never get out of that, kid. And I said, well, let's try. And so we walked around and found where the ground was the most solid. And I'll pull back the truck in here, and we'll see if we can reach it. And we just lacked a little bit. And I had a tow rope that wasn't the best, and so I doubled it several times and made the two reach. And he pulled and pulled. It finally started to move. Didn't do any good to run our motor at all. He just sat there and idled the wheels and nothing. He got mud yet. Oh.
All on a dare from your brother.
Yeah. And he whipped me. He was stronger and shorter. They called us fat and bones. Skinny and bones. I was skinny, he was bones. And Spud was always heavier than me. He could outdo me. And we, fought for the chocolates. I told you about that. And so,
Tell us about the pitchfork.
oh, the dumb pitchfork. And our barn, you always put the hay up in the top. There was this Jackson fork that come down, picked up the hay off the rack, and pulled right inside in the loft of the barn.
Mm-hmm.
We had it just as full as you could get it. But they'd leave a hole where you throw the hay down the manger. So Spud said, come here, I want to tell you something. And I think he had something on his mind that wasn't good. I said, no, I'm not coming down. He said, I'll come up and get you. And he was strong enough to push me down on those things if he wanted to. Because he was always a little stronger than me. And so I saw him coming up, sure enough, he was coming. So I grabbed a pitchfork and put some hay in it. I was going to throw it in his face. And he got it further than I expected him. And I shoved the pitchfork right in his head. I just about died.
And so how?
I didn't know what to do. I wiggled it and it wouldn't come out. and Dr. Ray was the doctor in Randolph. And he was a horse doctor. He was anything he needed. He was hurt.
How old were you?
He was still random. We were 10 years old. And I pushed that fork in his head. I couldn't pull it out by myself. And I was afraid of breaking the tine off inside, too, by wobbling it. And so he had to get somebody. He had to get on a horse to go get him. And so anyway, I said, boy, what will the folks do? And I said, Spud, you let me hold the fork with you and you try to back off, to back down. And finally it pulled loose. Oh.
Tell your kids this story.
Oh, Grandma, they're gonna watch the whole thing for family night you're our family night video for the next 2 months.
So we had a granary there that was about this high off the ground. It was about that high. And it just had round pipes coming up to it, holding it. And the mice would get in there so heavy. We had this so that they wouldn't get full of field mice. You go in there and open the door, and it was dark until you open it, and one of those mice would just go everywhere like that, in that thing. And so I said, Spud, I'm going to go see if there's any mice today. Just scare them out. And so when I went in, he waited for me when I come out, and I whistled and hollered for him, and he didn't show up. And when I walked around the corner of the granary, he was standing up on instead of sitting down on the ground, well, it was raised up in the air, so that the mice and that couldn't get in it. And he was standing on the edge where you can just stand there and hide like that, between the rafters. And as I come around the corner, he whacked me like that with this can. And Dee says, isn't that funny? Every time I cut your hair, I notice that.
Oh,
Knocked me right out.
you're kidding.
And I was the coolest thing. And he ran and hid. And we had a wood pile there. And when we stacked it, the only way you could heat the house was with wood. Mr. Cole was too far to go. Clear to Livingston.
Oh.
And so the mines are all in Kimmer, so nothing around Randolph. And we always stacked the wood like a roof. Just keep building it up, building it up. And so he'd run and get in that wood pile. And he'd get back in the center and just hid. Because it looked like it was all gone, just wood. And so Spuddy hid in there and I couldn't find him to save me.
After you came around.
He waited till I come out of it, see? Before he come and took me up. Hell, he's not, if I killed him, didn't dare to come out.